I want to encourage people to be open to hearing this from your friends and to know that this is something that might evolve and change over time. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name is Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today, we are talking about 5 things that your depressed friends probably won't tell you, because I want to educate folks about what it actually looks like to be a depressed person. I feel like we get a lot of representation in media that is not particularly accurate and or helpful, and I think it's very important to humanize and to normalize discussions about mental illness, and this is something that I know a lot about. So we're doing that today. As a general disclaimer before we get going, all of the content on this channel, but in this video especially, is intended to be for educational and sometimes entertainment purposes, but it is by no means a replacement for therapy. It is not therapy, cannot, has not, never will be therapy. So if you need a therapist, there are links in the description for you to go find one of your own. But this channel is not that. Not only is it physically impossible for me to therapize someone via the internet, but it is also very much illegal. And so that is very much not what we are doing today. Again, I just want to provide people with some broad strokes education about mental illness, and today about depression specifically. So let's get into the thing. While I pull up these tips, if you're new here, hi, thanks for coming. You should subscribe. There's a little button down there that you can click, and you can turn on notification bells to be notified when we're uploaded. Thing number 1, sometimes we feel like we don't deserve help. This might be a hard one for people to hear, but it is very much true. And this is why I said I want to normalize having real conversations about what real mental illness looks like. And sometimes when you're depressed, there's a lot of self-loathing that's going on. There's a lot of negative self-talk happening. This is a hard thing for support people to hear. And so it oftentimes goes unsaid, but it is very much a real feeling. Sometimes when we are depressed, or when someone that you love is depressed, the feeling is very much like, I'm a sack of shit. I don't deserve help, and I don't really feel good about asking for help. And so this is oftentimes where a lot of that lack of desire, or lack of actually asking for help comes from, because there's fear there, there's self-loathing there, there's shame there. Being depressed is a lot of really complex and competing emotional interests or experiences. And I think sometimes the tendency, especially in media, is to represent it as a very one-faceted, one-dimensional thing. And that is rarely, if ever, true. Oftentimes people who are depressed can sometimes feel very much like, fuck, I just want to get better. Like I want nothing else in the world than to feel normal, to feel okay, and to feel better. And sometimes there are days where you're like, this is my fucking life, and I fucking deserve this, and I feel like a sack of shit, and this is just the way that it will look forever and always. And it's a very hopeless place to be in. And I want to encourage people to sit with the reality that both of those can very much feel true for a depressed person, depending on the day and the circumstances and the environment, and that neither of those are an indicator either about whether someone has the capacity to get better, because we very much do. It's just that it can feel very hopeless sometimes. Thing number 2, we actually appreciate it when people continue to text us while we're socially withdrawing. For those of you who don't know, social withdrawal is a very common symptom of depression. This can sometimes be part of the self-loathing thing of like, I don't deserve to have friends, and so therefore I'm not talking to them. But it can also be just a feeling of overwhelm. This also happens for people who have anxiety and other mental illnesses, to be fair. But this withdrawal feature is particularly common for people who are depressed, because social interaction and like mustering up the energy to do typically what is like a reciprocal expectation in social interactions can feel just like all too much. And so we sort of recluse. We hide it, like literally physically in our homes, but also sometimes like emotionally we can kind of shut down and appear very numb or empty in social interactions. And having support people who choose to reach out anyways can sometimes mean a lot. This doesn't have to be anything wild, but sometimes even just a text message saying like, hey, I'm on my way home from work and I was thinking about you today. We haven't talked in a minute, and that's okay. This text message isn't judgment or an expectation that you respond, but I just wanted to know, or wanted you to know, that I love you and that I'm thinking about you and I would love to see you sometime. So maybe I'll text you in a few days and see how you're feeling, and if I can come over. Sometimes those text messages really mean the world, or voicemails, or like other forms of communication. Sometimes this can just look like sending TikTok videos to your friend to let them know that you know that they're alive and that you're thinking about them and that they matter to you. So I want to encourage anyone who's supporting a friend or a loved one who's depressed to know that the withdrawal is, first of all, a very normal thing, and it's not personal. It's not about you. And so if you're able to work past the feelings of hurt that oftentimes come along with this when your depressed friends are ignoring you, which are very human, and you're allowed to feel that way, by the way, because it does hurt to feel the withdrawal. But if you're able to work through those and to be involved and engaged in that person's life, even when they're not able to reciprocate that, it does mean a lot. Also be very wary of boundaries here though. If someone has voiced to you clearly, I don't want to talk to you, be respectful of that. Don't push people's boundaries in the sake of like, I'm just supporting you. Because if someone sets a boundary with you, it's very important that we respect that. Thing number 3 might be kind of hard for people to swallow, but it's important to talk about anyways. You don't understand actually. And it's a really hurtful thing to say, or like a hard thing to hear anyways. This can be true sometimes because if you are a person who has experienced depression and you have a friend who's experiencing depression, it can feel really tempting to say like, oh, I totally get where you're coming from. And you might have a better idea, but I do want to caution folks against saying things like this because it can feel really isolating and invalidating. The reality is that none of us have the ability to actually really effectively fully put ourselves in someone else's shoes. It's an impossible thing to do. And so while we are trying to empathize and it's coming from a good place, it can feel very isolating and invalidating to hear like, oh yeah, no, I totally know what you're feeling, because you probably don't, or you might not. It can also serve to shut down the conversation more than it does further it. And so I would encourage people, instead of saying something like, oh, I totally understand how you feel, to honor that like, I think I have an idea, or like, oh, I might have experienced something similar, but I am totally open for you to talk about it, or I'd love to hear more about it, or I would like to understand better. So do you mind talking to me about it, or if you're comfortable sharing with me, etc., etc. Again, you can always phrase these things, by the way, to sound less therapist-y. That's just the way that I communicate because it's like in my DNA now. But I want to empower people to communicate in a way that feels authentic to who you are and to use your own vernacular around this. But generally, I'd encourage folks to honor that like, we don't know actually. And that's okay, because you can still very much be an effective support person without knowing. Sometimes even more so, I would argue. Leaning into the truth that we are all the experts in our own lives and that we can learn from each other about that is very validating. It's very helpful. And it's also just an important interpersonal skill generally. So in this situation, especially, I want to encourage you to honor that. And for those of you who are like the depressed friend in this situation, know that it's okay for you to feel kind of put off by someone telling you like, oh, I know exactly how you feel. Because again, the truth is that they probably don't. We are all the expert in our own individual lived experiences. And it's okay also for you to voice that and to say, hey, actually, it kind of hurts my feelings when you say that. I would prefer if you just ask me how I'm doing and then give me space to tell you about it, because that's very loud and very human and very normal. Thing number 4, sometimes your help actually feels like judgment, and we hate that. Again, this might be another one that's hard for people to swallow, but especially in the realm of hygiene and cleanliness and things like that, the tendency is to try to help by doing those things for the person that we're supporting. But I want to move with caution around this one, because it is true that asking someone like, oh, how can I support you, can feel overwhelming and is sometimes not very effective, because like, I don't know, I can't even support myself. So how am I supposed to instruct you to do it? And so jumping in there to be helpful by like bringing dinner or, just offering our company is good advice sometimes. And doing for someone, like coming over to their house to hang out and sort of casually and subtly cleaning up their house, can feel really bad. It can feel like judgment, because oftentimes the depressed person is very aware that we are struggling to complete activities that most people will complete on a regular schedule, like cleaning our house. So coming over and cleaning your friend's depression nest might seem like an act of love to you, but it might actually feel like an act of judgment to the person experiencing it. I would encourage you to check in with the person that you're trying to support about this and to say, hey, is this something that you need? Or like, hey, I had the thought the other day, when I'm depressed, I have a really hard time cleaning my room, and I always wish that someone would just do it for me. And so I'm game. If you want me to come over and clean your house, I will, but I also don't want to step on your toes. And so let me know if that's something that would be helpful to you. This is a much more like compassionate and validating way to go about it than to just kind of like side-eye clean up all of the stuff. And also, again, I said this in one of our past videos, but I want to reiterate here, struggling to complete activities of daily living, like hygiene items, like cleaning the house, like to-do lists, and like sort of productivity things, is a very, very, very common feature of mental illness, especially depression. This is morally neutral. This is not a statement about someone being lazy or ineffective or like an incapable adult. It's just simply a feature of the way that mental illness works. And so I want to encourage people to be validating and kind to yourselves, first of all, but second of all, to like the people that we're trying to support, because it's a hard thing, and it's not that people who are depressed or mentally ill love living with unbrushed teeth or with the trash that's overflowing. It's just that it feels like all too much sometimes. So be nice to yourselves and everybody else. Thing number 5. This is another one that's probably hard to hear, which is why depressed people often don't say it out loud. But sometimes we don't want to get better. Again, I really want to normalize having conversations about the intricacies of mental illness, and sometimes this includes a lack of desire to get better. It's not to say that that will stay that way forever, or that your depressed friend will never get to a place where they want to heal. But again, I think it's important to talk about how much self-loathing there is, how much hopelessness there can be, sometimes involved with mental illness and with depression. It can feel really hard to say with our full chest, like, yes, I want to get better, when we feel really negatively about ourselves, or when we feel like we've tried a whole bunch of stuff and it hasn't worked in the past. I want to encourage people to be open to hearing this from your friends, and to know that this is something that might evolve and change over time, and that it's not something that we need to like ring the alarm bells about necessarily. I do want to caution folks against involving like police, especially, but like emergency services and things like that, unless it's like warranted. Not to say that you shouldn't involve them. Like, please don't take this to mean that you should never call 911, because it's very, very important and a really useful resource, especially if you have a crisis center or like a crisis line in your city. There are those links in the description also. So please don't hesitate to use them if you need them. However, a lot of times the reason that we hesitate to share this stuff with loved ones is because our fear is that like, oh, they'll think I'm forever doomed if I tell them that today I don't want to get better. And this is not always true. I want to normalize again that we will go through ups and downs, peaks and valleys, and phases with our recovery and our healing with mental illness and trauma and depression, and that's okay. And also, if you are a depressed person and you feel this, please know that you are not alone. This is a very normal thing. These are the things that therapists hear all the time, because people are afraid or uncomfortable telling them to their family and their loved ones. And I think we should really get to a place collectively as a society where we're able to hold space for that, and for that to not be like a deal-breaking statement. Again, I want to encourage folks to remember that this is a video that's meant to be broad strokes education, and so there is so much nuance to be had in this conversation, but generally the purpose in me making this video is to host a conversation about this that I think should be more out in the open. We as a society also have the tendency to shy away from discussing mental health and mental illness and therapy, and that bothers me. So I want to be a person who initiates these conversations, and I would encourage you to practice that energy in your relationship. So if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We do make content like this, and we also do a fun pop culture moment every now and again, so I'd love to have you stay and share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I will see you guys next time.